And you said it perfectly, because what the Biden administration wants to do is completely redesign the United States of America in a way that's contrary to the Constitution. The United States was designed so that each state would be able to have its own design. Texas is the perfect example of why we need to have states be different, because Texas ranks number one in pretty much every economic category.
Texas has a governor who understands what's going on here. He's got Ron DeSantis envy, but that's a good thing. I want him trying to be a competitor for DeSantis as the best governor in America right now. I want more red state governors to step up. There's room for it. And Abbott is speaking truth here about how the left wants to fundamentally transform the country. He understands that they are undermining some of the most essential components of our American experience and American freedom. And yet we have also the left saying that all these efforts to push it back are somehow anti-racism, right? That the left-wing project of convincing the American people to think first and foremost always about their race, and that race has to be an influencing factor in all government decisions, in all socioeconomic everything. Race has to be taken into account and balanced and judged by the woke. That's the whole point of all this, right? That's what we're told is necessary. Well, there are some people who are fighting back. And in the state of Texas, in South Lake, which is a suburb, I believe it's northwest of Dallas, pretty well-off suburb, there was a victory in the school board election there that's getting some national attention. Now, usually school board elections are not something that you'd start a nationally syndicated radio show with hundreds and hundreds of stations across the country on, but this matters. Because I think people have woken up to the fact, pardon the expression, that unless we start taking action, we're just going to keep losing. And we're losing things in our society that are precious for all of us, for your children, for your grandchildren. The Marxist left is going for it right now. They are actually on the march and in power, and they are trying to transform the country. And they're doing this through education. They're doing this through economic policy. And race, as a tool of dividing the American people, is a central weapon in their arsenal. So they're trying to teach kids that this is the way the country has to be. You'll recall a few weeks ago, there was Paul Rossi, the math teacher at Grace Church, who wrote for the Barry Weiss Substack. Barry Weiss was the opinion editor of the New York Times, and she was hired specifically to bring in more diverse voices, meaning allow some conservative voices in there, and then she was fed to the wolves. But Rossi, who teaches at a private school in New York that costs over $50,000 a year, wrote this: "Right now, my school is asking me to embrace anti-racism training and pedagogy that I believe is deeply harmful to them and to any person who seeks to nurture the virtues of curiosity, empathy, and understanding. Anti-racist training sounds righteous, but it is the opposite of truth in advertising. It requires teachers like myself to treat students differently on the basis of race. Furthermore, in order to maintain a united front for our students, teachers at Grace are directed to confine our doubts about this pedagogical framework to conversations with an in-house Office of Community Engagement, for whom every significant objection leads to a foregone conclusion. Any doubting students are likewise challenged to reframe their views to conform to this orthodoxy," end quote. I mean, this is what you would have expected in the Soviet Union. This is actually Soviet style of argument, where your very doubt is evidence of your deficiency. If you don't agree right away, that proves your deficiency, and therefore you must believe even more. Critical race theory is Marxism around race instead of class, meaning economic status. That's what critical race theory is. And it is being taught in schools. It's being taught to your children. They're coming home and they're lecturing their parents even about how engage enough with structural white supremacy and dismantle it the way that they're supposed to. I mean, this is madness, but it's very effective. It's brainwashing. Well, this school board in Southlake just had a win of people who are actually opposed to this, and no surprise, the media is just doing everything they can to run interference, to show this in a way that the good guys are the people brainwashing your kids with Marxist claptrap. Yeah, that's how the media approaches this. The media is disgusting. I mean, the corporate media in this country is overwhelmingly the enemy of the American people, the enemy of the American experiment. They harm. They are harmful. They've been harmful during the entirety of the COVID pandemic. They were harmful with their lies about Russia collusion. They're harmful now as they cheer for people to be locked up in solitary confinement for the crime of a so-called insurrection that in many of these cases were just people who were engaged in trespass during a riot, something the left does on a regular basis. So yes, the corporate media are in fact the enemy of the American people, and we should be honest about that. It's one of the best things Donald Trump said out loud, among many things. Here's how NBC News reports on this election in Southlake, Texas. In bitterly divided election in Southlake, opponents of anti-racism education win big. I mean, bitterly divided, it's 70-30, first of all. So it wasn't a close election. I know there's a school board election, but it wasn't close. And it's only bitterly divided because the left-wing Marxists are a bunch of lunatics. They've been brainwashed, and they want to brainwash everybody else. And the stuff they say is absurd and contradictory, and they have no real answers, but they want to get at the kids when they're young. Remember, at first they took over the universities, and we said, oh, well, people are crazy in college, and then they grow out of it. That was our theory. Wrong. No, that's not how it works. 4 years of Marxist indoctrination, whether it's at Harvard or community college, it's all going to end up with the same thing, which is a majority of those students realize that at some level their status in society is tied to these beliefs. If they want to be liked and elevated and get certain kind of jobs and get hired by certain companies. And that's because you've already had now a couple of waves, a couple of generations of the Marxist shock troops coming out of colleges and universities. And now they're in their 30s and 40s. And they have power in institutions that have a lot of power in America, like Google and Facebook and Amazon and American Express and Delta Airlines and Nike. The woke maniacs, we thought, oh, they'll pay taxes and they'll figure it out. No, they moved to blue enclaves, to deep blue cities on the coast predominantly, or just very blue cities throughout America. And they have only like-minded friends, and they have like-minded echo chambers of social media, and they work at companies that put out these corporate multiculturalism and diversity statements. I mean, it's embarrassing, the stuff that's being said by these companies. I mean, I played for you last week that woman from the CIA who's talking about how she doesn't have imposter syndrome anymore, and she's a cisgender Latina female diagnosed with like some kind of anxiety disorder or something. But she's earned her place in the CIA. I mean, the CIA is turning into has honestly been for a long time, a jobs program for the overwhelmingly mediocre and lazy. And that's the hardest federal agency to get into, by far. CIA is the most selective, and it's turned into a joke. 10% of that place are the kind of people that you would want working at the CIA, meaning steely-eyed, intelligent, hardworking patriots who are all about the mission. It's 10%. And then it's probably 20 or 30% sloth. And then the rest are left. The rest are woke. Yes, that's what's happened. This is in the intelligence community. Don't you see the infiltration all throughout America of people who hold that the Constitution is essentially a foolish document written by white racist slaveholders, so it doesn't really have any moral or ideological pull for them at all. It's not some document of political genius that has created the greatest society in the history of the world. No, it's evil. And yes, we should have, bans on white male authors in libraries and replace it with, LGBTQ female writers of the 17 and 1800s or whatever, right? They're just coming up with all this nonsense all the time. And we thought, because conservatives focus on what they think matters and the day-to-day and what is real, we'll cede all this ground to the other side. It's fine. Let them have Hollywood. Let them have academia. Well, now they're teaching your 8-year-old that maybe he's a girl. And if you have a problem with that, you're a bigot, and your child is being taught that you are the problem. This is America now. This is happening all over the place. Some of you might live in a red enough part of the country where you don't think it really affects you. Go to your state capital. Go to the largest city in your state and tell me what's going on with the school district there. And you could say, oh, but I'm okay where I am. Really? Where's population growing the most? I'm not talking about on a state level. I'm talking about urban versus rural. The cities dominate the politics of states, whether it's California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. The cities dominate in these places. Increasingly, you're going to see in Texas, if they just get San Antonio and Dallas and Houston blue enough, they think they can flip the state. They're not trying to win, the Permian Basin. They're not trying to win West Texas. The Democrats don't care. They're going for the population centers. But we cede so much of this, and I understand the mentality. We just want to live our lives. But unless we start getting active, unless the right, conservatives, reasonable people mobilize, you've seen what the other side is willing to put us through with their absurd lockdowns and mask mandates. And the hypocrisy, they don't care. Hypocrisy is not a criticism that stings the left. They enjoy hypocrisy. Hypocrisy means they have the power to force you to do things that they won't do, to force you to obey rules that they themselves will break. Hypocrisy is one of the perks. It shows that you're under their boot heel. They have no problem with it. You can cry about hypocrisy all day. They have the power. Right? It's like Pompey Magnus in ancient Rome. Do not quote laws to men with swords. Don't quote hypocrisy to the woke left. They don't give a crap. People are figuring this out now. You want to stop this? You need the power to stop them. We need to identify the problem and take it on. And this is the local school board. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not, national level power and all this other stuff. We're always so focused on the presidency. Every community, every town and city and state, there's a fight going on right now for who's calling the shots, who's in charge. You all have a role to play. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.